The applause from the previous segment is still fading when the moderator's voice, measured and warm, announces the next phase of the evening, one that had been hinted at but never fully explained to the audience. A segment called Messages. Across borders, he says, where voices from distant places would speak directly to the panelists in attendance. There's a slight shifting of bodies in their seats, a quiet ripple of curiosity. AI Pacino sits at the far end of the long wooden table on stage, posture relaxed, his profile half in shadow from the amber stage lights. He wears the expression of someone used to long public events, polite, practiced, mildly disengaged. His right hand rests on the arm of the chair, fingers idly tapping as if counting the beats until his turn is over. The screen behind the panel glows a soft blue before cutting sharply to a still image Ibrahim Traoré at a press conference, mid-sentence, his gaze locked with the lens as though looking at everyone in the room. The crowd murmurs and then stills. Pacino's eyes flick to the image, curiosity barely touching his face. The moderator glances toward him as if to say, "This one's for you." The lights fade until the room is nearly dark, the stage now lit only by the pale glow from the screen. A faint hum of the projector fills the space, strangely loud in the sudden silence. Then the still image blinks away and Traoré appears in motion, calm, upright, every syllable deliberate. There is no grand greeting, no smile meant to charm. His words land with the weight of stone on water. He begins by telling of an incident in Burkina Faso, one that happened without fanfare, without international coverage, where an unarmed young man was beaten for speaking in his native language during a security stop. The narrative is stark, stripped of sentiment, and yet its details carve into the quiet of the room. Pacino's brow furrows almost imperceptibly, his tapping hand now still. As Traoré speaks, the incident expands into a broader truth, the long shadow of colonial structures that have never been dismantled, the subtle and overt erasures of culture, and how cinema, in its most insidious form, can soften and repaint histories until they serve the comfort of those far from their realities. He does not accuse loudly. Instead, he dismantles gently, each fact laid bare without raising his voice. Then, without pause, the thread tightens and becomes personal. "Mr. Pacino," he says, his voice neither warm nor cold, "you once played a man who refused to stay silent in the face of corruption. But you had a script to follow. I live in a place where the script has been written against us for centuries." The words hang in the air, neither aggressive nor forgiving, but heavy with implication. On stage, Pacino's profile stiffens, his jaw a quiet hinge of tension. The audience notices the shift, small but undeniable, as if a current has changed direction. Traoré continues, the weight of his gaze unbroken. "What you do with this truth will outlive your films." When the screen fades to black, there's no music cue, no fade-out applause, only the stark silence of a room that has just been asked to hold something it cannot put down. The moderator clears his throat, his voice slightly too quick as he thanks Traoré and begins to turn to the next item. But Pacino, still staring at the dark screen, raises his hand slightly, not to speak yet, but as if to mark this moment for himself, to keep it from sliding into the easy forgetfulness of public events. The cameras catch the glint of something in his eyes, unreadable, unsettled, just before the lights shift for the next panelist. The scene holds there for a beat too long, the lens tightening on his face, before dissolving into the next movement of the evening, the tension now woven invisibly through the air, waiting to be answered. The silence that followed Traoré's recorded words at the festival seems to echo into the past, and the scene dissolves into a flicker of news clips, online headlines, and hurried whispers in dimly lit hallways. Months earlier, the controversy had begun quietly, buried in industry newsletters, a footnote in the entertainment press. An American-backed media project was announced, a sweeping dramatization of resistance movements in West Africa, packaged for what the producers called a global audience. The problem was not its ambition, but its omissions. In the retelling, leaders of African uprisings were transformed into grateful allies of foreign officers, strategies became acts of chance, and the bloodlines of resistance were softened into background details. In the writer's room, African historians were invited only in the early stages, their work filed away under research before being reinterpreted into something glossy and marketable. The machinery of cultural erasure was slow and methodical, first in script revisions, then in casting decisions that shifted skin tones lighter, accents flatter, and resistant slogans into palatable aphorisms that would not trouble sponsors. In one meeting, a donor suggested cutting a scene showing colonial brutality because it would make European audiences uncomfortable. Pacino's name was attached to the project not as a writer or director, but as an executive producer, lending gravitas and international recognition. He never altered a word, but his presence on the credits was a silent stamp of legitimacy, one that could not be separated from the final product. Through narration, we moved between boardrooms and studios, a glass table where executives sip imported coffee while debating which dialect sounds more cinematic, a monitor replaying a scene in which a resistance leader is shown kneeling before a white officer, a scene that never happened, but which passed through 3 layers of approvals. In a cramped CAF in Ouagadougou, a junior producer leans across the table toward a journalist, voice low, steam curling from a chipped mug. "We told them the script was wrong," she whispers. They laughed, said accuracy doesn't sell. Her eyes flicked to the doorway, afraid of being overheard. In another corner of the world, an African historian types an email to Traore late at night, the glow of the screen lighting his tired face. "They took my grandfather's story, changed his skin tone in the animation, and told me it was for market reasons. These fragments of truth pass like smuggled messages, too small to break the machine, but sharp enough to cut through those willing to listen." The narration shifts back to the present, the night before the festival panel. Pacino sits alone in a Manhattan hotel suite, the city's muted roar beyond the glass. The room is warm but feels airless. He leans back in an armchair, laptop balanced on his knees, reading through articles about Traore, profiles that paint him as both a political firebrand and a disciplined soldier against cultural exploitation. He stops at a viral video, Traore in a crowded hall, standing before a European diplomat, speaking with measured precision about neo-colonial aid policies. His voice is unshaken than as it would be on the festival screen. Pacino watches the clip twice, once as a casual observer, once as someone recognizing the resolve in another man's eyes. He closes the laptop slowly, pours 2 fingers of whiskey into a short glass, and stands at the window. The city below is a tangle of lights, indifferent and unblinking. He does not feel anger. Anger is too active, too immediate, but something quieter, heavier. Unease. He knows the weight of his own image. It has opened doors, silenced doubts, given life to stories in which he played the hero. That same weight now hangs over a film that, despite his limited role, is being condemned as an act of cultural theft. Online, African activists and filmmakers are calling for accountability from every high-profile name attached. Some are blunt: if your name is on it, you own it, while others frame it as a moral responsibility for someone with his influence. The hashtags gain traction. Panels are cancelled, red carpet invitations rescinded. For weeks he avoids public comment, thinking perhaps the storm will burn itself out. But the festival is his first scheduled appearance since the controversy began, and the organizers have made it clear that avoiding the subject will be impossible. On the day of the panel, as he is driven through narrow city streets to the theater, Pacino watches pedestrians through the tinted glass. A young man passes with a protest sign rolled under his arm. 2 women walk together, one speaking animatedly, phone in hand, the screen showing Traore's face mid-speech. Pacino wonders if the video he will see tonight will be the same one or something new entirely. He tells himself he has been through criticism before, reviews that cut deep, interviews that pressed harder than expected, and he believes for a moment that his experience will be enough to carry him through this too. That in the theater, under the lights, he can offer a half smile, a careful line, and move on. But as the car slows near the entrance and the muffled sound of the gathering crowd reaches him, there's a tightening in his chest, a shadow of the unease from the night before. He walks inside, takes his seat at the far end of the panel, and waits, not knowing that within minutes, the carefully built defenses he carried here will be dismantled, not by anger or spectacle, but by a voice speaking quietly from a screen. The theater is still cloaked in that heavy post-video silence, a silence that feels deliberate, as if the room itself is waiting. The moderator's voice finally breaks it, polite but edged with curiosity, asking Pacino if he'd like to respond. For a moment, he doesn't move, doesn't blink, the question hanging unanswered while the audience shifts, a few leaning forward, others glancing at each other as though unsure if he will speak at all. Then, with a small exhale, he leans forward, elbows braced on his knees, eyes fixed not on the moderator but somewhere beyond the footlights. His voice, when it comes, is softer than expected, lacking the theatrical resonance that made him famous. I thought I understood injustice. I thought I'd done my part. But I've just realized, he pauses, not for effect but because the words feel heavy. I've been standing in the center of the frame for stories that were never mine to tell. The camera lens catches faces in the crowd, a row of young activists in worn jackets, heads tilted toward him as if hearing something rare. An older critic in a wool scarf, arms folded in a posture that could be doubt or self-protection. A journalist scribbling in quick, tight strokes. The staccato burst of camera shutters punctuating the stillness. Pacino's gaze drifts for a moment, as he recounts a memory not rehearsed, not polished of filming in the global south decades ago. He describes locals who told him the unfiltered truth of a conflict, details so vivid and painful they refused to fade, and how the studio chose to ignore them entirely, reshaping the story into something marketable. He admits he said nothing, that he let the fiction stand because he told himself it wasn't his place to interfere. His voice falters slightly on the admission, though he keeps speaking, a slow unraveling of quiet complicity. Traore's earlier words replay in his mind, not as an accusation, but as a mirror reflecting something he has avoided looking at for years. The reflection is not flattering, it is exact. Pacino's hand, resting on his knee, trembles once before stilling. Each sentence he offers is stripped bare, deliberate, as if refusing the safety of performance. I don't want an applause for saying this, he says, eyes lifting briefly toward the audience. I want the people who were erased to be the ones telling the story next time, and I will use whatever is left of my influence to make sure of that. In the unlit corners of the theater, the true antagonists of this moment are absent. The corporate backers, the executives who made their decisions in soundproof rooms, but their absence does not protect them. The weight of his words is already reaching them in real time. Phones buzz in their pockets as live stream notifications pour in. Viewers across continents are clipping and sharing his statement within seconds, hashtags multiplying with every repost. The global reaction fractures instantly. Some voices say too late, others call it the first honest thing he's said in years. There is no consensus, only momentum. On stage, Pacino's eyes glint under the harsh theater lights, the angle of his shoulders showing the strain of what he has just released. The room seems to hold its breath again. The moderator thanks him quietly, but the sound barely registers over the murmured exchanges beginning to ripple through the crowd. Pacino lowers his gaze, his head tilting slightly as though speaking to himself, but the microphone, angled too close, catches the words anyway. I've never felt this way before. It is not a line meant for the public, not a craft quote for the headlines, but the kind of truth that slips out unplanned. The feed sends it out across the world in seconds, the words playing on loop in countless phones, televisions, and feeds a confession caught in the moment before the lights shift and the event moves on, but one that will not easily be forgotten. The first hours after the panel pass in a muted blur. Pacino exits the theater flanked by security, flashes exploding in bursts, reporters shouting questions he ignores. The footage plays on evening news loops across continents, his quiet admission dissected by pundits and strangers alike. In the cab ride back to his apartment, city lights smear across the window like streaked paint, his reflection half visible, half lost in the blur. Upstairs, he sits in darkness for a while before opening his laptop. His inbox is split down the middle, dozens of messages from African filmmakers, some with links to scripts or reels, inviting him to collaborate. Others brimming with venom, calling him a sellout, accusing him of turning his back on the industry that made him. He reads each one slowly, no replies yet, just letting them sit there, the glow of the screen painting his face-pale dot in another part of the city. A boardroom meeting is held behind closed doors. Around a polished table, the backers of the controversial film speak in clipped tones, their language careful but loaded. Within 20 minutes, a unanimous decision is made. Pacino's name will be removed from all promotional materials. The press release, drafted before the coffee cools, cites creative differences. But the truth is quieter and sharper. It is punishment for breaking the unspoken code of silence that shields the machinery from public scrutiny. His removal is not dramatic. It is surgical, designed to leave no trace of dissent in the record. They control. The poetic counterweight arrives in the form of a headline breaking weeks later. A young African director announces a film retelling the same historical event the original project had distorted. Her funding comes not from polished investors but from a patchwork of grassroots donations, small grants, and community partnerships. In interviews, she names Traore as a key force behind the project's existence. When the teaser trailer drops, online, Pacino watches it alone in his living room, the frame of his television casting a soft light over the apartment. The images are unpolished but alive, layered with voices and faces that feel unfiltered, their dignity intact. A faint smile touches the corner of his mouth, brief, almost shy before he closes the browser. That night, he drafts a short email to Traore. No subject line, no preamble, just one sentence: "You didn't break me. You showed me where the cracks already were." He reads it twice, then sends it without hesitation. Months later, the film premieres at a community screening in Ouagadougou. The scene is open air, folding chairs packed together under strings of lights. Children sit cross-legged in front, elders in the back, every eye fixed on the makeshift screen. Traore is there, his posture relaxed but attentive, blending into the crowd rather than presiding over it. When the final credits roll, the audience breaks into applause, not the polite kind, but the deep, sustained kind that carries gratitude. Thousands of miles away, in a dim apartment in New York, Pacino watches the livestream. He doesn't take notes, doesn't think about how it will be received, he just listens. His expression is unreadable, but his stillness is telling. For once, he is not the center of the frame. The narration closes over the image of him leaning back in his chair, the glow of the screen fading as the livestream ends. Sometimes, the voice says, the most radical act is stepping out of the frame.